I had been on the team 41 days when I learned that everything I knew about who the dangerous people are was wrong, and that the most lethal person on Tarn Ridge had been standing behind me the whole morning, holding a clipboard, saying nothing. You have to understand what it meant to be the new man on that element. I was the radio operator, the junior guy, the one who carried the heavy battery and got handed the empty water cans, and I carried all of it gladly because of who I got to carry it for. These were the men whose names you heard in the schoolhouse and didn't believe were real. Royce Tanner could put a round through a playing card at 800 meters in a switching wind and tell you which way the card had been facing when he did it. Senior Chief Garrison Pike had run more ridgelines than I had years on the earth, and when he spoke the whole valley seemed to lean in to listen. I had spent 2 years sweating to get near these men, and now I was near them, and I would have crawled across broken glass before I let one of them down. So when the Marine showed up at the staging area before we lifted out, I judged her the way I judged everything that wasn't the team, as something in the way. She came across the gravel with a pack that looked too heavy for her and a long case slung muzzle down across her back, and she had the kind of stillness that I read then, as someone trying not to look nervous. She was maybe 30, sun-cured, a scar threading pale through one eyebrow, her hair cropped and going to dust the second she stepped off the hello pad. The patch on her shoulder said she belonged to a Marine reconnaissance outfit nobody on our team had worked with. Liaison, the tasking said. Partner force coordination. Somebody up the chain had decided our Overwatch mission needed a Marine to talk to the Marine patrol moving the valley road below us, and so they had sent us her, and I looked at the long case on her back and thought, that's a lot of rifle to carry just to work a radio. You're the coordination element, Pike said to her. It wasn't a question. He was reading her like I'd read her, deciding the same thing. Staff Sergeant Holt, she said, I'm attached to you for the duration. I'll run the link to the patrol and stay out of your way. Her voice was even and low and gave away nothing, and I mistook that, too, for someone keeping her head down where she didn't belong. Good, Pike said. Stay out of the way and we'll get along fine. Tanner didn't even look up from where he was laying out his glass. She can hold the spotting scope if she gets bored, he said, and a couple of the guys laughed, and I laughed too because they laughed, and because it felt good to be on the inside of the joke instead of the outside of it. Holt didn't laugh. She didn't bristle either. She just set her pack down where she was told to set it, off to the side, away from the gun line, and she began, very quietly, to do something I didn't understand the meaning of until much later. She began to watch the valley. We lifted out at 04 and were on Tarn Ridge before the sun cleared the far wall of the Mabar. I want to make you see that ground, because the ground is the whole story. The Mabar Valley ran east to west between two mountain walls, a brown river of road and dry terraces and stone-walled compounds threaded along the bottom, and our ridge stood on the north side, a long spine of broken rock and scrub with a notch in it we called Op Harrow. From Harrow you could see 11 kilometers of the valley road in either direction, which was why the road belonged to whoever held the ridge, and why the enemy had spent a week trying to take it back, and why a partner force foot patrol of 40 men was going to walk that road below us at midday to clear a culvert the enemy kept seeding with charges. Our job was simple to say and hard to do. Sit on Harrow, watch the high ground across the valley, and kill anything that tried to kill the patrol. The far wall, the south side, the side we had to watch, was a brute of a slope the maps called the Sirhin, a kilometer and a half across the valley from us, and rising in shelves and folds and dead ground that a man could disappear into and reappear from 100 meters away. It was, Tanner said with something close to affection, sniper country. The kind of slope where a patient enemy could dig a firing position into a fold of rock, and you would never see it until it spoke. If they hit the patrol, Pike said, settling his elbows into the dirt and glassing the Sirhin, it'll come from over there. Royce, you and Dell own the slope. Mercer, you own the radio. Staff Sergeant. He didn't look at Holt. You own the link to the patrol and nothing else. Copy, Holt said. And then she did something I noticed without understanding. She didn't set up behind the rocks where the link radio was. She moved 20 feet to the flank, found a fold of ground with a clean view of the whole Sirhan, lay down behind the long case she had not yet opened and put a small spotting scope to her eye, and she began to read the slope the way you'd read a page, slow, left to right, top to bottom, and then again. I thought she was sightseeing. I thought, here is a Marine who wants to look like she's part of it. The patrol stepped onto the valley road at 11:40. I had them on the net by then. A calm Marine sergeant named Ochoa walking point security a kilometer below and to our west, his men strung out along the shoulder in good spacing, moving toward the culvert. I relayed their movement to Pike, and Pike grunted and kept his glass on the Sirhan, and Tanner and his spotter Dell lay along the gun line with their big rifles already on the slope, hunting, and the morning was so quiet you could hear the wind change its mind. That was the thing about Harrow that I didn't have the experience to register, and that Holt, I would learn, had been cataloging since the moment we arrived. The wind did not blow, it breathed. It came up off the valley floor in the heat of the day in long, slow rivers of rising air, and it slid down off the snowfields on the high peaks in cold sheets, and where those two met, out over the middle of the valley, right across the gap our rounds would have to cross to reach the Sirhan, they braided together into something that wasn't one wind but 3 or 4, stacked in layers, each moving a different speed in a different direction. You couldn't feel it on the ridge. You could only see it, if you knew how to look, in the way the dust moved on the valley floor, and the way the heat shimmer leaned, and the way a hawk 300 feet up held its wings. I didn't know how to look. Neither, it turned out, did the best snipers I had ever met. They knew how to look at the slope. They did not know how to look at the air in between, because they had spent their careers in country where the air in between was simpler than this. At 11:53, the Sirhan spoke. It came as a flat ripping crack that rolled across the valley and a spray of road grit kicking up around Ochoa's point man, and then more of it, a dug-in machine gun and rifles opening from a fold high on the slope, and the patrol came apart into the ditches and the culvert and behind the low stone walls, and Ochoa's voice came up on my net fast and tight. Contact south, high on the slope. We're pinned. We cannot move. We have men exposed at the culvert. Got it, Pike said, very quiet, the way the steadiest men get quiet when everyone else speeds up. Royce, the fold 2/3 up under the dark shelf. You see the muzzle wash. I see it, Tanner said. Take it. And here is where my whole understanding of the world began, very slowly, to break. Tanner was the best shot I had ever stood next to. I had watched him do impossible things on a range as casually as a man tying his shoes. He settled behind that rifle, and his breathing went long, and the world held still around him the way it's supposed to, and he sent a round across the valley at the dug-in gun. It missed. I didn't believe it at first. I saw the strike, a puff of rock dust a full body length to the right of the muzzle wash and low, and I thought, ranging shot, he's walking it in, that's how it's done. He adjusted and fired again. Dust again, right and low, a little less but still a miss, and the enemy gun never even paused. Dell was firing now too, the two of them working the fold, and the slope ate their rounds and threw up dust a meter wide of every shot, always to the right, always low, and down on the road. A Marine screamed on my net that they had a man hit at the culvert and could not reach him. Royce, Pike said. The wind's not holding, Tanner said, and for the first time since I'd known him there was something in his voice that wasn't certainty. It's pushing right, I'm holding 2 mils left and it's still pushing right, he fired again. Right, low, it's not holding. I want to be honest about what that moment did to me, because it's the center of everything. I had built my entire idea of strength on these men. I believed, the way a young man believes, that there were people who simply could not miss, and that I was lucky enough to carry batteries for them. And now the 2 best shooters I knew were lying in the dirt sending round after round across a valley, and missing a target the size of a doorway, and a man was bleeding to death on a road below us because of it. and I felt the ground go out from under something I hadn't known I was standing on. "We can't hit them," Dell said. "Just like that, flat, the way you say a thing you don't want to be true. Senior Chief, we cannot hit that gun. The wind across the gap is—" he shook his head. "I've never seen it do this." Pike's jaw worked. He keyed his own radio to call for aircraft and got back the answer we already feared: 30 minutes out. Weather stacked over the pass. And 30 minutes was 11 minutes too long for the man at the culvert, and everybody on that ridge knew it, and for one terrible breath nobody said anything at all. Then a low, even voice spoke from the flank, from the fold of ground where the liaison had been lying all morning behind a case she hadn't opened. "It's 3 winds," Holt said. "You're holding for 3:51 p.m. She didn't move when she said it. She was still behind the spotting scope, still flat in her fold of ground, and she said it the way you'd correct a younger man's grip on a tool, not unkind, not loud, just true. Tanner's head came around. "What did you say?" "You're reading the slope perfectly," Holt said. "Your elevation's good. Your come-ups are good. You're missing right and low because there isn't one wind across that gap, there's 3 and they're stacked. You've got a valley updraft coming off the floor in the bottom third, that's pushing your round up and you're compensating down. So your lows are you fighting a wind that's already going to quit on you before the round gets there. Middle third, you've got the cold air sliding down off the snowfield on the west peak, and it's moving left to right across your line about twice as fast as the dust on the floor is telling you. Top third, where the gun actually is, it's almost still. It's in the lee of that dark shelf. So you're holding a full value left for a wind that's only full value in the middle of the flight and dies at the target. You're overholding. The round's done drifting before it gets where you're aiming." There was a silence on that ridge that I have never forgotten. It was the silence of men who knew their trade, hearing their trade described better than they could describe it themselves, by someone they had spent the morning deciding wasn't worth a glance. "And how," Tanner said slowly, "do you know that?" "Because I've been reading that gap since 06, Holt said. "It's the only thing worth reading up here. The slope doesn't move. The air does." Pike looked at her for a long moment. Down on the road, Ochoa's voice came up again, ragged now, the wounded man fatting, the patrol unable to lift its head. Pike was a man who had spent 30 years learning when to trust his own people over an outsider, and every instinct in him was built to say no. I watched him weigh it. I watched the math of the dying man do what pride couldn't. "You shoot," he said. It wasn't a question and it wasn't an invitation. It was a man out of better options. "Tanner, give her your gun." "Senior Chief." "Give her your gun, or call that Marine's mother yourself." I expected her to take Tanner's rifle. She didn't. She finally opened the long case she had carried up the mountain and never touched, and what came out of it was not magic. I want to be clear about that, because for a while afterward I told the story as if it had been magic, and it wasn't. It was the opposite of magic. It was a rifle like Tanner's, a little heavier in the barrel, scarred and worn at every contact point the way a tool gets worn when it has been used 10,000 times by the same hands. There was nothing special about the rifle. Everything special was in the woman lying down behind it. She didn't hurry. That was the first thing. The whole world was hurrying, the patrol, the net, my own heart slamming in my ears, and she slowed down. She built her position like she was laying bricks, dragged her pack in under the buttstock, settled the bipod, worked her body left and right until the rifle pointed itself at the slope without her muscling it. She licked her thumb and held it up, not for the wind on the ridge. She'd already told us the ridge wind was a lie, but I think out of some old habit, some courtesy to the air. Then she put her eye to the glass and went still in a way that Tanner went still, that deep animal stillness. And I understood for the first time that I was looking at the same thing I'd been worshipping all morning, wearing a different patch. "Dell," she said, "I need you to spot for me, not corrections, just impacts. Tell me exactly where you see the strike, clock, and distance off the target and nothing else. Can you do that?" Dell, to his enormous credit, did not argue. "I can do that." "Mercer." She didn't look at me. She knew my name. I don't know how she knew my name. Nobody had said it to her. "Tell the patrol to keep their heads down for 90 seconds and not to move. I don't want one of them standing up into my line." I keyed the net and told Ochoa 90 seconds. "Hold what you have." And Ochoa said back, "Copy 90. And I have never in my life wanted anything as badly as I wanted the next 90 seconds to work. "First round's cold," Holt said to herself as much as to us. "Cold barrel throws a hair low and left from this rifle until it warms. I know that. I'm building it in." She breathed. "Holding a half left for the middle layer and nothing for the target. Letting the updraft give me the rest of my elevation back. This one's the question. The next ones are the answer." She breathed out, and somewhere in the bottom of that breath, between the rise and the fall of it, she fired. I had my own glass on the slope. I saw the round arrive. It struck the lip of the dug-in position, high left of the gun by maybe a foot, a spray of rock right at the edge of the fold, and Dell called it before the dust settled. "High left, 1 foot, 10 o'clock. "Good," Holt said softly, and there was no relief in it and no triumph, just a woman reading the answer to the question she'd asked. "Cold bores accounted for. The layer's a touch faster than I read it, coming a quarter right and dropping a hair." She worked the bolt smooth, unhurried, the empty case flipping out into the dirt, and she settled again. "This one's for the gunner." The second round did not miss. I won't dress it up. The machine gun on the slope stopped, and the man behind it stopped, and the sudden absence of that hammering across the valley was so total that, for a moment, I thought my ears had failed. Down on the road, the volume of fire coming up at the patrol dropped by a third, all at once, because the gun that had them pinned was simply gone. "Guns down," Dell breathed. "Riflemen now," Holt said. "They'll shift. Watch the fold to the right of the gun. There's a man been feeding it. He'll either run or he'll take the gun. Either way he moves." She was already tracking right, the rifle drifting like a compass needle. "There. Dell, the runner, low fold, moving right to left across the dead ground. On him. Same layer. He's lower on the slope so the cold air's got more of him, holding a hair more left. A breath. A shot." Dell said, "Down." And Holt was already off him and onto the next. And what happened over the next 11 minutes on Tarn Ridge is the thing I have spent the rest of my life trying to describe to people who weren't there. She did not do anything impossible. That's what nobody believes when I tell it, and that's the only part that matters. She did a possible thing, perfectly, 12 times in a row, under a pressure that had broken better-rested men, while reading an envelope of moving air that 2 of the finest snipers in the fleet had stared at all morning and never solved. Every shot was the same shot. Read the layer the target was sitting in, hold for that and only that, account for the cold barrel going warm and then hot, and let the round go in the still place at the bottom of the breath. She talked the whole time, low and flat, not to us, to herself, the way a surgeon narrates a cut. "The updraft's building with the heat, coming up another quarter. That one's in defilade behind the shelf. I'll wait for him to clear it. Barrel's hot now. She walk a touch left, building it in." The fourth man tried to drag the gun to a new position, and she let him get it settled. Let him think he's safe. It steadies him, and took him the instant before he fired. The seventh was behind the dark shelf in dead ground where no round could reach him, and she didn't waste one trying. She waited, breathing, for 90 seconds while Dell counted the wind for her, until the man's own impatience brought him a half step into the open to see why his friends had gone quiet, and that half step was the last one he took. There was a malfunction at the 9th. I saw it and my heart stopped. The bolt didn't seat right, a round hung up and on a range that's an annoyance, and in that moment it felt like the end of the world. Holt didn't flinch. Her hands moved without her looking at them, the same drilled motion 10,000 times worn into her, locked the bolt back, stripped the bad round, fed a fresh one, dropped the bolt, and was back on glass inside of 3 seconds, and she never stopped reading the wind while she did it. "Lost my count of the lull," she said, mild. the only thing close to frustration I heard from her all day. "Dell, give me the dust again." Floor dust pushing left steady, heat shimmer leaning hard. Updrafts peaked. "It'll start to quit in the next few minutes as the sun comes off the floor." She found her 10th man, holding less, the days changing, shot, down. The 11th broke and ran full sprint down the slope toward the dead ground at the bottom, the smart move, the move that should have lived. She tracked him the whole way, the rifle swinging slow and certain, and she did not rush the shot to beat him to cover. She let him run. "He's running into the bottom layer," she said. "The updraft'll lift my round right into him if I let it. I just have to give it to the air." And she gave it to the air, and the air carried it, and the running man went down 4 strides short of the rocks that would have saved him. One left. The 12th was the patient one. The others' patience had gotten them killed, and so the last man had gone to ground and stopped moving entirely, somewhere in the folds below the dead gun, and for a long while there was nothing to shoot at and the valley was almost quiet. The patrol had its head up now. Ochoa had reached his wounded man and the corpsman had him, and the word came up the net that he was alive. He was going to stay alive, and I relayed it and saw something move very slightly in the set of Holt's shoulders, the only crack in her the whole engagement, the smallest easing. "Last one's smart," she murmured. "He'll wait for dark, he doesn't know the light yet." "The light," I said. I couldn't help it. "Sun's coming off the west face. In about 4 minutes it's going to throw a hard shadow line right across the middle of the slope, and anything in front of it lights up like a stage." She didn't take her eye from the glass. "He's behind where that line's going to fall. He'll move when he thinks the shadow hides him. It won't. It'll frame him." 4 minutes later, the shadow line crossed the slope exactly where she'd said it would, and the last man, certain the dimming light was his friend, rose into a low crouch to slip to better cover, and the dying sun lit him against the dark rock like a figure cut from paper, and Holt exhaled into the bottom of her breath one final time. 12, Dell said, into a silence you could have leaned against. Nobody spoke for a while. Down in the valley the patrol was up and moving, flowing toward the culvert and their wounded, and the work they'd come to do, and the slope that had held them pinned for the worst hour of their lives was a quiet brown nothing again, the way ground always goes quiet and innocent after, as if it had never done a thing. Holt cleared her rifle. She did it the same unhurried way she'd done everything: bolt back, chamber checked, the weapon made safe, and only then did she come up off the glass and sit back on her heels and pull in a long breath and let the morning back into her body. There was dust caked in the scar through her eyebrow. She looked, for the first time, tired. It was Tanner who moved first. He crawled over from his position, Royce Tanner, the best shot I had ever known, the man whose name they spoke in the schoolhouse, and he stopped a few feet from her, and I watched him try to find words for something he had never had to say in his career. "I held 2 left," he said finally. "The whole time. I'd have sworn my life on 2 left." "It was 2 left," Holt said. "In the middle. That's the trap of this gap. The wind you can read isn't the wind that matters. The middle layer's loud and it lies to you. The layer at the target is quiet and it tells the truth, and you can't feel it from here. You can only get it from the dust and the time of day and what the slope's doing to the air. It took me a winter to learn it on a range that did the same thing." She looked at him and there was no edge in it at all, no "I told you," nothing but one professional to another. "You weren't shooting wrong. You were shooting a different mountain than the one in front of you. I've shot this one before." "Where?" Pike said. He had come up behind us and his voice had changed. "Where have you shot a mountain like this one?" Holt was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her blouse and came out with a folded card, laminated, soft at the edges from being carried a long time, and she handed it not to Pike but to me. I never understood why me, except that I was the one who'd been watching her with the most undisguised contempt all morning, and maybe she knew that too. I unfolded it. It was a record card from a high-altitude long-range course I had only heard rumors of, A place up in thin, cold air where they sent the ones who were already the best to find out who was more than that. And the name on the card was hers, and the standing record on the card, the one that had not been broken in the years since the date stamped beside it, was also hers, and beside her name was a call sign. Kestrel, I read out loud before I could stop myself. Pike took the card from my hands. He read it the way you read something you already believe and don't want to. The thing about a record like that is that there's no arguing with it. It isn't a story she told us. It's a number, witnessed and sealed and standing, and it had been riding in her blouse the whole time she lay in the dirt, and let us decide she was the help. "You're Kestrel," Pike said. "I'm a staff sergeant attached to your element to run a radio," Holt said, and she said it without any irony at all, which was somehow the thing that landed hardest. That was the tasking. I don't override a SEAL element's own shooters on their own gun line. That's not my call to make. She nodded down at the valley, at the patrol moving safe along the road, until it was the only call left. Then I made it. I have thought about what happened next more than I have thought about almost anything in my life. Senior Chief Garrison Pike, who had 30 years and a reputation that filled rooms, who had looked at this woman in the staging area and told her to stay out of the way, came to his feet on that ridge. And he came to attention, and he saluted her. He held it. That's the part I tell people and they don't quite believe, that it wasn't a quick courtesy, a nod, a thing done and finished. He held the salute the way you hold it for something that has earned the holding. And down the line, Tanner got to his feet and came to attention too. And Dell. And the rest of the element. The men who had laughed when Tanner said she could hold the spotting scope if she got bored, they stood, in the dust, on the spine of that mountain. And they rendered to a Marine staff sergeant the respect they had not been willing to give her a glance of 6 hours before. The men who could not hit the slope, saluting the woman who had cleared it. Holt got to her feet. She came to attention as a Marine comes to attention, and she returned it, and there was nothing on her face that took anything from the moment. No satisfaction, no told you so, no flush of victory. Just a soldier receiving from other soldiers the only currency that has ever mattered between them. "Staff Sergeant Holt," Pike said and brought his hand down. "Thank you." "You'd have solved it by the third magazine," she said. "You ran out of time, not skill. That's the whole difference today, time." She bent and picked up her rifle and started, methodically, to case it. "The gap'll teach you. Spend a winter on it and you'll read it in your sleep. I can write you up what I know before I rotate out if you want it." "I want it," Tanner said, fast, like a younger man like me. And that her offering to teach them, and Tanner taking it the way I take water in the desert, undid the last of the thing in me that had broken that morning, and rebuilt it into something better. Because I had thought, when those 2 men started missing, that I'd been wrong to worship strength, that there was no such thing as the unbeatable people I'd believed in. That wasn't the lesson. The lesson was that strength isn't the thing that never misses. Strength is the thing that reads the mountain in front of it instead of the one it expected, that slows down when the world speeds up, that carries the record in its blouse and the humility in its hands, and doesn't reach for the rifle, until reaching for it is the only honest thing left to do. The strongest person on that ridge had spent the whole morning being told to stay out of the way, and had stayed out of the way, exactly as ordered, right up until staying out of the way would have killed a man on a road. And then she had done a possible thing, perfectly, 12 times, and asked for nothing. We held Op Harrow another 9 days. Staff Sergeant Holt ran the link to the patrol, exactly as tasked. And on the quiet evenings, she lay out on the flank with Tanner and Dell, and a spotting scope between them, and taught them the 3 winds of the Mabar Gap, the loud lying middle and the quiet true top, and the updraft that gives your elevation back if you let it. And they wrote it all down in a little book that I would bet is still being copied by hand and passed down on that ridge to this day. I carried her empty water cans the same as I carried theirs. She thanked me by name every time. I never called her the liaison again. None of us did. When she rotated out, she shook every hand on the element and Pike walked her to the hello himself, and the last I saw of her, she was a small still figure with a long case slung muzzle down across her back, looking not at us and not at the hello but out, one more time at the valley, reading the air over the gap out of pure habit, the way the rest of us breathe. I have stood next to a great many dangerous men since that mountain. I know now what I'm looking at when I see the real thing, and I know it isn't the loudest gun or the biggest name or the man who tells you he can't miss. It's the quiet one at the edge of the firelight who's been reading the ground since before you woke up, who will let you decide she's nobody right up until the moment somebody's life depends on her being somebody, and who, when that moment comes, won't say a word about it afterward, because to her it was never about being seen. It was about the man on the road getting home. They sent us a Marine to mind the radio. They sent us Kestrel. And the strongest lesson she taught the best shooters I ever knew, she taught without firing a shot. She taught us to read the mountain we were actually on.